A single military missile impacts the dark waters of the Red Sea. Half a world away, that physical explosion instantly translates into a financial shock, with fuel prices suddenly spinning out of control. This is a chart showing inflation trends in the UK and the US over the last year. Up until recently, the data looked optimistic. Inflation had steadily cooled, dropping down to 2.6% in the UK and 3.5% in the US. A steady drop in the global cost of petrol and diesel acted as an anchor during this period, pulling the broader inflation numbers down with it. But that stability has shattered. The escalating conflict in the Middle East has pushed global oil prices back to $100 a barrel for the first time since May. The collapse of a geopolitical ceasefire, thousands of miles from Western shores, is now threatening to reverse months of hard-won financial relief for everyday households. The immediate catalyst for this price shock traces back to late February, when the US and Israel launched military actions against Iran following a collapsed temporary ceasefire. That diplomatic route hit a dead end, with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirming that the leadership in Iran was not ready to make a deal. While the political talks stalled, a secondary physical threat emerged on the water. Houthi militias in Yemen escalated their attacks on maritime infrastructure, directly targeting oil tankers. This map highlights why these attacks are disruptive. The Red Sea is the exact route Saudi Arabia uses to bypass the contested Strait of Hormuz. Tracking the market's reaction, Brent crude, the global oil benchmark, surged over 6% in just days. Global energy markets trade on future certainty. The mere possibility of closed choke points immediately prices higher risk into the system. When global crude markets panic, the impact hits domestic drivers almost instantly. In the UK, petrol prices have jumped 5p since July, approaching £1.56 a litre, with diesel averaging £1.72. The reality for American commuters is identical. Average national gasoline prices have quickly surpassed the $4 per gallon threshold once again. But drivers aren't the only ones paying. Economists call this secondary ripple effect transportation pass-through. Logistics and retail businesses rarely absorb elevated delivery costs. Instead, they transfer those costs directly onto retail prices of groceries and manufactured goods. These spikes ripple through the economy, increasing baseline expenses for everyday essentials, from a simple loaf of bread to raw materials for a house. The final institutions forced to respond to this economic blow are the central banks, the organizations officially tasked with managing a nation's inflation. When the price of everyday goods climbs, these banks typically respond by keeping interest rates elevated to cool down consumer spending and slow the economy. Right now, however, they are facing intense contradictory political pressure to drastically slash borrowing costs for citizens who are already feeling the financial strain. The loudest demands for these cuts are coming from U.S. President Donald Trump, who has explicitly pushed officials to lower rates to provide immediate financial relief to Americans. But that political demand is hitting a wall against the newly appointed U.S. Federal Reserve Chair, Kevin Warsh, who publicly stated he has no tolerance for persistently elevated inflation. Caught between the inflationary threat of $100 oil and demands for cheaper credit, both the Fed and the Bank of England have frozen. They are holding interest rates between 3.5 and 3.75%, refusing to offer short-term relief. As long as military conflict disrupts the physical flow of oil through Middle Eastern choke points, central banks will remain trapped in this defensive posture, keeping the cost of mortgages and borrowing elevated, even as political pressure to cut them intensifies.